Hi boys and girls, welcome to your video on absolute value. What I'm going to do is take you through what absolute value is, and then we're also going to take a look at how to compare absolute value. In the middle of the video, we will also fill out the graphic organizer, and then I will show you another couple examples of absolute value as well. So what is absolute value? Absolute value represents how many units a number is away from zero. Absolute value is symbolized with these bars. So anytime you see those bars, they represent the absolute value of a number. They're not ones. Sometimes kids get them confused with ones, but they're bars. They're a little bit thicker and usually a little bit longer than the number. So in this case here, what this is saying is how far is 3 away from 0? Or what is its absolute value? So 3 is 3 units away from 0. So the absolute value of 3 is 3. Again, let's look at -2. -2 on the number line will be right here. And -2 is 2 units away from 0. So its absolute value would be 2. -9 is located down here on the number line. -9 is 9 units away from 0. Therefore, its absolute value would be 9. The absolute value of 7. 7 is 7 units away from 0. So the absolute value of 7 is 7. Now, what we're going to do is fill out the graphic organizer. We're going to go back to the video to look at how to compare absolute value, but there's a couple different other examples I want to show you. The absolute value of 3 is 3. 3 is 3 units away from 0. The absolute value of -6 is 6. Okay, -6 is 6 units away from 0. Now in this case here, 2 is 2 units away from 0, but because the negative sign is on the outside of the absolute value, we're going to apply that after we find the absolute value. So the absolute value of 2 is 2, but because the negative is up front, this would read negative absolute value of 2. So we apply that negative afterwards. And then same thing here. -7 is 7 units away from 0. And I'm going to apply the negative afterwards. Now what we're going to do is compare absolute value. So the absolute value of 6 is 6. The absolute value of -4 is 4. I put these boxes here to help you show your work. So 6 is greater than 4. Therefore, the absolute value of 6 is greater than the absolute value of -4. In this case here, the absolute value of 4 is 4. The absolute value of 0 is 0. 4 is greater than 0. Therefore, the absolute value of 4 is greater than the absolute value of 0. Now let's look at this slide here. The absolute value of -3 is 3. The absolute value of -5 is 5. 3 is less than 5. Therefore, the absolute value of negative 3 is less than the absolute value of negative 5. So these boxes are here to help you show your work and understand these numbers. In this example here, the absolute value of negative 1 is 1. The absolute value of 6 is 6. 1 is less than 6. Therefore, the absolute value of negative 1 is less than the absolute value of 6. So now we're comparing the absolute value of negative 5 to the absolute value of 2. The absolute value of negative 5 is 5. The absolute value of 2 is 2. So 5 is greater than 2. Therefore, the absolute value of negative 5 is greater than the absolute value of 2. You can also think of it as negative 5 is further away from 0 than positive 2. Therefore, it's greater. The absolute value of 4 is 4. The absolute value of negative 7 is 7. 4 is less than 7. Therefore, the absolute value of 4 is less than the absolute value of negative 7. Some kids think that the absolute value means the opposite or just making it positive, but I want you to really understand what the bars mean. Yes, for the most part, the number becomes positive unless there's a negative sign outside of the absolute value. Let's look at this example. This is different from the last slide because 4 doesn't have the absolute value bars. The absolute value of just 4 is written as 4. The absolute value of negative 7 is 7. 7 is bigger than 4. Therefore, 4 is less than the absolute value of negative 7. These are a little bit trickier. The absolute value of negative 3 is 3, but the negative sign is on the outside, so we have to apply it. And then we just have negative 8. Well, negative 3 is greater than negative 8. Therefore, the negative absolute value of negative 3 is greater than negative 8. This is kind of a tricky problem, but I just wanted you to hear it as well. And this is our last example. So again, the negative sign is outside of the absolute value, so I'm going to apply it afterwards. The absolute value of 4 is 4, and I'm going to bring down my negative sign. 10 is just written as 10. Negative 4 is less than 10. Therefore, the negative absolute value of 4 is less than 10. In class tomorrow, we're going to be comparing absolute value a little bit more, and you can refer to your graphic organizer for additional help. All right, everyone, have a good evening, and I will see you tomorrow. It's time for me to go to the masquerade ball, where I will absolutely look fabulous.